Hi, and welcome to Chapter 2. So with this chapter, we're going to go through ICD-10 CM conventions. We have our disclaimer again, just read through that. Okay, so what are we going to be covering? We're going to be covering instructional notes, abbreviations, cross-reference notes, punctuation marks, terms of and, with, in, without, do, our instructional notes. General notes, inclusion, code first, what to use for additional codes, what to code also. So general notes, what are they? They appear in your tabular list, again, not the alpha, the second part. And they just provide general information on usage in a specific section. So you can go ahead and go into your tabular list in your book, and you will see different information that will just explain maybe that disease or that injury a little bit better. Okay, so let's talk about inclusion and exclusion notes. So they indicate when a certain condition's not included in a given subdivision. So if it's placed at the beginning of the chapter or section, the inclusion or exclusion note, it applies to everything within that chapter or section. It's not repeated with each category. So notes affecting a code may be located on a previous page. So that's why you need to look around. So maybe look again at the beginning of that section or the beginning of that category. Inclusion notes. Again, these start with the word includes. They define, they give examples of the content of the chapter. They may be synonyms or conditions similar enough to be classified to the same code. So inclusion notes, they're not exhaustive. Rather, they list certain conditions that will reassure you as a coding professional. Okay, so what we're going to do, you're going to pause the tape and you are going to open your book. Okay, so what I want you to do, I want you to go to, again, the tabular section, second part of your book, and I want you to go to code M80. M80. So go ahead and pause the tape if you have to. So with this, let's go with the inclusion. So as I look at M80, and we're looking at the beginning of M80. M80 is disorders of the bone density and structure. That's M80 through M85. Okay, let's go to our first category. We have osteoporosis with current pathological fracture. It includes osteoporosis with the current fragility fracture. So again, one thing, if you have anything with a fragility fracture, it's included in that section. You know, it may not come out and tell you, but again, it's included. So as we go on here, then we get into exclusion notes. These are by the words exclude. So stay in the same section that you're in. Okay, so let's go over these. This is important right here. So we have two types of exclusion notes, and it's really, really highly recommended you look at these in your book. They have some good examples in your book. Excludes one. Should never be used at the same time as the code above, the excludes one note. These two conditions can never occur together, except when these two conditions are unrelated to each other. So let's go back to M80. So what they're telling us is that if somebody has osteoporosis with current fragility, or just, I'm sorry, with a current pathological fracture, that excludes one. That means you can never ever code collapsed vertebrae with anything in this section. So anything in the M80 section, it's all excluded. Or it's telling you here, a pathological fracture you cannot include in the M80, okay, because that's going to be the M84, or wedging of a vertebrae. Okay, what you can code, we have excludes two. This condition excluded is not part of the condition represented by the code. So at this point, it is acceptable to use both codes together if they're present at the same time. So what they're saying here, if I look at the excludes 2 here, and if I have a diagnosis of, let's just look at age-related osteoporosis with current pathological fracture, M80.0. If I have that code and there's a personal history of osteoporosis fracture that I have, I should use that Z code too. Okay, so again, you use them both. Another example would be under excludes, and I think this comes from your book. I'm winging it here, but there is in there where if we have a patient who has a congenital condition, or I should say an acquired condition. So again, an acquired condition is something that they acquired in life. Okay, so an excludes 1 would say you can never code this condition as congenital with an acquired. So either I was born with a condition or I wasn't. Okay, I can never code the two of them together. Excludes 2. So let's just say that we have somebody with anxiety. Okay, that's my code, anxiety. And excludes 2, it says, you know what, if they also have attention deficit hyper disorder, you need to code that with the anxiety. So that's there is telling us we need both conditions coded. So excludes 1, again, never use the two together. If it states it, and excludes 2, yeah, if they have both conditions, you need to code them. So code first. The tabular list identifies a code for a condition that is a manifestation of an underlying disease. So underlying condition at present must be sequenced before that code. So a lot of times you'll be reading in the tabular or the alpha, and it will tell you to code something first. And when, again, it references you to go that route, you need to code that first. Or if it tells you to use an additional code for the manifestation, you need to use an additional code. So one thing about these rules and conventions is just to follow what the code book is telling you. Okay, same thing I said with the additional code. Code also, here we may need 2 codes to fully describe a condition. I always tell students, if I have you know, a one-liner in these books that you're going to do this year in your coding handbook, and the one code doesn't fully describe that one-liner, then I need to have another code to fully describe what I'm trying to code out. So we'll get more into that when we get into actual coding. Abbreviations, not elsewhere classified, which means, again, otherwise it's not otherwise specified. It is the equivalent of unspecified. These abbreviations are often misunderstood, misapplied by coding professionals. Again, make sure we know the differences. Make sure you look through your book for guidelines for the correct coding selection on these. So NEC means, you know what, there isn't anything specific enough. Okay, so usually the NEC ones are going to end in a 0.9. Where the NOS means not otherwise specified, those are going to be 0.8. We have something that could be more specific, but they don't have it. Just as I stated here. 5th character usually is going to be a 9, 6th character 8, or 5th character 9. NOS, okay, again, 4th or 6th character, again, we're going to character 9, 5th character 0. So again, a lot of these codes here between the two are going to end in 8 or 9. Cross-reference notes, they're used in the alpha index, the first part of the book, and it's just telling you to look elsewhere before assigning the code. A lot of times you go ahead and look up a code, it's not going to take you where you need to be. It's going to say see also, go here, see condition. So it's going to take you around the book, you know, to do some looking. Punctuation marks, just kind of read through that. We have square brackets, colons, relational terms, and the word and should be interpreted to mean and or when it appears in the title. With and in should be interpreted to mean associated with or due to when they appear in a code title. Your alpha index or instructional in the tabular list. Okay, so due to. So if we have the due to, it indicates a causal relationship between the two conditions. So again, we make such an assumption when both conditions are present. So usually we have to have, again, something that's going to say it's due to. So what else do I need to code? All right, so make sure you read through chapter 2 again. Go ahead in the tabular and try to find some examples of what I went through in my lecture and see what you come up with. That's the best way to learn. Look for some of these examples before you start. Your handbook also has great examples. The PowerPoint didn't put those in here, but they are wonderful and really do go through chapter 2 of your handbook. I can't emphasize enough how good of a reference this handbook is.